Well, I had an opportunity this morning to go out and visit the General Dynamics plant. I was very anxious to see the procedure that they have undertaken to make sure that the airframe is structurally sound before it's released for flight. I was very impressed with what I saw out there. They've gone into a thorough testing program, and in the process they've developed some new testing procedures. And I saw one of the planes in the cold chamber with the hydraulic fixtures to bend the wings, and I was impressed by how much of a strain they put on those wings. They're going to bend them so the tips will move up something like 4 feet, and I think if the planes will take this test, they're going to be a pretty safe plane.
Well, first, we're explaining the President's program for minority business enterprise to them. Secondly, covering in some depth and detail 2 programs. First is helping them learn and understand how to bid on federal government business. And secondly, explaining to them a preferential procurement program that we have for minorities and other disadvantaged individuals. The purpose of the latter program is to provide an initial boost so that the firms can either come into being or can expand and become viable businesses in the economic life of American industry.
Is it strictly an economic thing, or do we actually need the small businessmen in the government procurement program? Can they play a vital part?
Well, not only can they, but they do. This is essentially a minority business thing, but all of them are small business, and to that extent, it's interrelated as a small business effort.
I have a very simple personal view, and that is don't invoke arms unless you intend to use arms for a successful and rapid termination of conflict. Using arms in some sort of a gradualism or some kind of a holding operation with limitations that the enemy can clearly see that he can exploit. This brings out the worst aspects of military action. So I come back to my original point. Don't start a war unless you intend to carry it through to a successful finish, and use the reasonable means to do so, and don't vacillate.
Admiral, I believe you used the phrase a reasonable conclusion in Vietnam. Does that mean then that you would consider a reasonable conclusion the winning of the war?
Well, that would be the most reasonable, in my opinion. A reasonable conclusion is one in which we don't abandon the South Vietnamese to their fate, in my view. An unreasonable conclusion of the war would be to just bug out.
Would you call some of the tactics political bossism?
I'd call them Tammany Hall. That's what they appeared to me to be. And all new precinct chairmen like myself find this to be the case when they go to a Dallas County Executive Committee meeting. They're castigated if in any way they disagree with the chair.
How many Republican delegates would agree with you in this position?
I think in that convention, had they known what the stakes were, had they been able to be advised as to what the crucial issues were, I think they would have overwhelmingly voted with us. They did in '68 when these rules were called to their attention. They amended them.
Are you trying to say also then that new delegates to the Republican convention are stifled?
Yes, because of a lack of communication. This is the way the party headquarters affects their desires. They keep the people from knowing what's going on, and therefore all they can do is say aye or nay, and they don't really know what the issues are. And it's not that they're not intelligent, but they're not advised. They're not communicated with. And we got to open up the party if they're ever going to know what the issues are. And this is the essence of this movement. And we're just starting to open it up, and we're bound and determined to do it.
Professor Grinspoon spoke about the evidence that marijuana does not lead to the harder drugs, and he quoted a Harvard colleague of his, and I corrected him during this program. Unfortunately, my correction was deleted from the program, so it appeared as though Greenspan's statement stood without my opposition. The fact of the matter was that a Harvard colleague of his had announced to the newspapers the day that I arrived in Boston a month ago, saying that he had studied 61 marijuana users for 2 years and that there was absolutely no evidence of progression to harder drugs. I called him up and found that he had only studied 35 marijuana users, not for 2 years, but 6 months, and that during this time, 9 of them had used LSD, some of them multiply, and 2 had tried heroin, so that the information that Grinspoon had quoted was exactly to the opposite point, and I made this in reply to Grinspoon on the television program, but my reply was deleted. And since this is a very important topic about the question as to whether there is progression, I am glad for this opportunity to make this correction.
Dr. Jones, why do people progress to a harder drug? Why not stay with marijuana? Why would they use heroin or LSD?
Now, the reason for this depends upon the personal evangelism of those that like a particular drug and introduce it to their friend. This is how it always spread, and there is no other way that the drug culture spreads. But not only does a kind of drug spread in this way, but the actual mode of administration of the drug depends upon how it is presented from one person to another. And the transfer from marijuana to amphetamines, to LSD, to barbiturates, and to heroin is all distinctly measurable and creating a national crisis at the present time, well beyond the problems that are created by marijuana alone.